what the kind of premise of this building was to really kind of bridge the gap between Britain and South Africa at the time, and almost put us forward as this new technology and new age kind of country, and bringing us into our own, in a sense, through our trade, because our roots were so kind of rich and available to other parts of the world as well. But then kind of through its usage as a grain silo around 1995 was the last known exports, and it kind of tapered down at that point because of all of these internal conflicts around our leadership and around the kind of unionization of South Africa. And all of these tensions ultimately led to this building becoming in disuse. And so this building was standing for some time, and in 2001 the government had decided to decommission it, which meant that there was no money coming into the maintaining of the space. The prior uses was no longer kind of important any longer. And so the question was, how do we use a grain silo if it cannot be used as a grain silo? And so the kind of reformation proposals came forth. And of course the first kind of proposal was that this is prime real estate, and so let's bulldoze this building to the ground, use this prime real estate, probably for a mall, and build something of its place. Luckily though, this building is protected by heritage laws, and I think South Africa's heritage laws is quite strict as well. So any building over 60 years old kind of falls into that ambit. And part of that is the preservation of the facade of the space at least. And so what you see on the outside is what you would have seen about 100 years ago, which is amazing because this is the 100th year of the site as well. And so the reformation of the space really took place internally, and I think most of it will be atrium as we see. So the designer, not architect, who says a week, there's a distinction, is from the US, worked very closely with South African firms as well as his own architectural firm, Thomas Edelman's firm, to kind of reimagine what this space could be used as, and of course putting people as the forefront of the utilization of this building. And so he needed to really open up the space. And he was really inspired by the prior uses of the building, so much so that he decided to fashion the entire atrium after a popcorn kernel. And so legend has it that he came on this kind of site visit, saw a popcorn seed on the floor, was so inspired that he decided to kind of fashion this entire atrium. And so
that's the legend.
The functional way of doing that was to kind of superimpose that popcorn seed into a 3D mapping of the silo at the time. And in doing so, all of these cutouts and chambers were revealed. So this is the cutouts and chambers that we kind of reference.
In terms of my nationality, but I came to South Africa in 2007 with the ambition to extend my visual practice as an artist. Around that time, the capital city of Zimbabwe, there were just two galleries. There was a gallery called Gallery Delta, where me and Nancy were mentored many, I think 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. We were mentored by a lady named Helen Leros, who started the gallery with her husband. They're both late now. The gallery was in existence for 45 years, and we were one of the very fortunate kids to be mentored by them. I was one of the last to be initiated in the school. But I think the challenge in Harare was that there were only two galleries. It was the National Gallery of Zimbabwe and Gallery Delta. So I had to make a decision to stay in Zim and separate from the idea of making art, or come to South Africa and figure out a plan and ways to extend my practice as an artist. So in 2007, I came to South Africa, and I think because one of the challenges in the continent in terms of the arts is that there isn't regulation for visa requirements with regards to artists. So what artists would usually do is that they'll spend 3 months here, go back home, and do this whole cycle. So for me, I didn't find any form of consistency within that. So what I decided to do was to apply for a refugee status. So I had to find a way to bypass the system, but at the same time, I had to be documented in South Africa. So the refugee status allowed me to spend more time and to figure out what the plan was as an artist in Cape Town. When I came to Cape Town, there were not a lot of black artists exhibiting. I think there were the likes of Zanele Mowoli, Robin Rods, Mustafa Maruka, Nandipa, and then that was the rise of Collective.
Oh yes, an incredible collective from Collective in Cape Town.
So I used to go and see the exhibitions going around in Collective in the shack. So that's how far back I came to Cape Town. So I've been practicing for, I'd say, more. The years I have practiced in South Africa are much more longer than the years I've been practicing in Zimbabwe. And I think much more of my visual identity was developed by me being an immigrant in South Africa. So I think you can just
When you then arrived in Cape Town, what kind of communities did you find? Did you make, like networks, friendship?
No, I had to all do the whole shebang from the beginning.
Yeah, and curious about also Great Mo Studios. I think you had a studio there. Yeah.
So when I came, I actually worked at a gallery in Stellenbosch, in a street called Church Street, the equivalent of Long Street. And Church Street is the busiest street in Stellenbosch because that's where most of the tourists come in and stuff. And I came the very year that SMAC opened.
Okay.
So during my lunch breaks, I'd go and visit SMAC Gallery, come back and return. So I used to, the gallery I was working was much more like a hustler type of gallery. It wasn't like a, so in exchange for me to work there, I would do paintings and I'd sell them on my own. But then I started outselling the owner of the gallery and he wanted commission. So so I met artists and artists started telling me places to go. So my first studio was at the Castle of Goodall. I had a studio there. And I studied architectural mosaic under the Spear Wine Farm used to have a school that taught architectural mosaic, but they had someone who had studied at Spilimbergo. It's a place in Italy that teaches mosaic. So we had to learn mosaic from historical perspective. We had to learn about the process. We had to learn how to cut stone, how to. There's a whole system within mosaic that's the opposite of painting and drawing. So we had to learn that. I learned that for 3 years.
Is this where you
That's exactly. But then with this type of work, I tried to create a bond a marriage between drawing and mosaic.
Yeah.
But basically, my work, the conceptual ideas behind my work started from having to engage with the reality of xenophobic attacks that happened around, I think, 2008 and the following years. And I think one of the much more pivotal moments was when I had to question my form of privilege. When others were being attacked and killed, I had to question myself as to if that were me, what would I do? So what I decided to do was that I started making work. I don't know if people know a bag called the Made in China bag. It's this bag that has different strap of colors and stuff. So sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's pink. So I decided to make work where I was imagining myself or imagining the stories with regards to foreign nationals, because the bag itself has a historical connection with migration, either regional migration or city-to-city migration. So and also people migrating from the rural areas to the towns, urban migration. So the idea behind the bags is that most Africans within, I would say, post-modern times have used that bag ever since in existence as a bag where essentials are put in and people travel with them and whatsoever. So then the bag becomes your suit. So
like
instead,
a marker of
exactly. So what's more important is what's inside, but then the bag itself then encompasses who you are as a person. So then that becomes the reality of cross-border people. So for me, I was playing around with that idea and not necessarily wanting to use the aesthetic of the bag as the bag itself, but to use the bag within a medium that's more, I guess, not only just visually palatable to the masses, but just a pattern from that idea. And I started painting a lot using that bag, and then there was a period where I think there was the association between Dan Halter, who also uses that bag in his videos and installations, and also I think it's in Nobuko. Exactly. So we were kind of
exactly. Just for context.
Yes, yeah.
South African
visual artist
very
also did the residency
exhibition.
So there was a period within where the three of us were sort of like working within that aesthetic, but then I pulled away from that because I wanted to expand the idea of migration without using
the bag itself,
because I felt it became too easy. So then sometimes as an artist you find challenges where maybe you don't have a studio, you can't paint you don't have a studio, you can't paint at home. So from maybe moving from studio to studio, as you mentioned, sometimes I'll move from Great Mo and start working from home, but I can't necessarily paint with oils in my flat. So what I'll do is I'll start using water-based, easier mediums. So for example, ink and drawing and charcoal and whatsoever. So then I'll challenge myself within those periods of limitation as to how effectively can I speak and talk about this narrative with the limited resources I have. So so a lot of that happened. Then I needed to figure out how I can push the medium of mosaic into my own. So because I had done mosaic and I had the previous history of being an artist, I married both mediums together, drawing and mosaic, which was very difficult because, for example, you have a surface like that wall. If you draw on that wall with charcoal or graphite, I mean, if you use fixative, it just blows the graphite away. So I had to approach certain elements of mosaic from a scientific perspective as to if I create layers while they're wet, and if I draw in them, the bond that mixes the mosaic, which is kind of like concrete, then solidifies the graphite. So these were not things that we were taught at the mosaic school. I had to figure out on my own how I can effectively juxtapose these mediums and create hybrids within my work and stuff. So so most of my work has been about migration, and in 2022 I got selected to represent Zimbabwe at the Venice Biennale. And my work was more, I think if there's a piece with a huge scroll. So that piece is a 10-meter drawing that I did for the Venice Biennale.
It was so impressive.
And this piece is part of a huge body of work that it includes the mosaics and the drawings, and I wanted, the title of the piece is called The Zimbabwean Gaze.
The Zimbabwean gaze.
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 Yeah. So like I was playing around with this idea of how academics use the white gaze, the black gaze. So I wanted to use the Zimbabwean gaze, but basically this idea, like when people are in a building, somebody who's on the ground floor and on the third floor and on top of the building may be facing the same, maybe it's the mountain view, whatever. But then because you're on top and the person, because I'm at the bottom and the person who's on top are seeing the same thing, but our perspectives are different. And when I made this work, I wanted to question the idea of how everybody is seeing Zimbabwe but have different perspectives about Zimbabwe. And this was a much more challenging body of work because it was sponsored by the state. So I needed to figure out a way in which the work should be, even though the work visually has a very, very spiritual deep meaning, it actually talks about the nature of what's going on. So back in the day, when somebody passes in the local areas, whether in the rural areas or in the townships, a quick indicator of a funeral is putting a red cloth either by the gate or by a tree to say that there's a funeral here. So for me, I wanted to create this idea of a funeral based on the emotions of people, but also questioning history, questioning people, questioning the forces that sort of like push and pull us, then creating a scroll that has this heritage of the Zimbabwean bird, just like the old, scrolls back in the day. So this took me like 3 to 4 months, because I think the greatest thing was that we were given like a year to create the work and stuff like that. So after I came back from Venice, I had some issues with Home Affairs in South Africa, just like anyone else. So, so I had issues with them because I was in communication with the country where I come from. So they revoked the refugee status. So what I decided to do was, it was a very difficult period, but what I decided to do was to actually honor the refugee status and the 15 years of me having it. So basically I have a body of work called Chipepa. So for the local South Africans that are here, there's a song called Maria Pepa. And also, I think Gerald Machona also dealt on it a little bit. So Maria Pepa means paper money. And then Chipepa means, from a street lingo, it means documents. So usually when you bump into Zimbabweans in Joburg or Cape Town, wherever, there's always a question, Mapepago only Chipepa, meaning, are you documented? Like there's always that question. It's kind of like a dark cloud that's always hovering illegal immigrants in South Africa. So I think the 15 years of me was just, the 15 years of honoring the document is to sort of like create a body of work that's ongoing, that sort of like reflects and also questions the idea of like the things that I've gone through. And also not only just me, because even people who come to my studio, the likes of Zemba and also Patrick, they just come in, they're like, no, this is not only your story, this is our story as immigrant artists and stuff. So it's an ongoing body of work that I'm working on. There is no time limit. I'm just like exploring, working on it. But besides that, yeah, that's my practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharing your work. What really resonates with me with your practice is this like level of opacity, how you can actually hide and reveal certain things depending on who's looking. So like if someone from Zimbabwe who's an authority is looking at your work, they might not see the critique that you actually bringing to the table. And if someone is looking as a SADC resident who's based in South Africa, when they see the papers, then it also says something else, but someone else might not see that. So I like how it has this element of shape shifting depending which floor you're at. So I really appreciate
It's
that.
funny that you brought that up, because when I started working on this document, I went through a difficult period where, so the first batch of paper I used was HP paper, and I realized that it's not a color, so I need to use a color paper. So I found a place that sells Munken paper, which is non-acidic. So then I had to go to another factory to get it printed, and they're like,
You can't
no,
do that.
this is a document.
Yeah.
We've been in
It's an
this
official
situation.
one.
So then there was another, so the company where I bought the paper from, then they tell me, oh no, you can just go and print it at Postnet. And then I'm like, okay, but, I went to Postnet with the paper, because I think I made something like 1,000, the drawings that you see of these refugee statuses, they're like close to 1,500. So I had to take them to Postnet and then ask them if they can copy. And then they're like, this will take 30 minutes. So then I had to go and grab some coffee, and I had to stand on the corner so that I can just see if there's any home affairs officials, what we call it. Because then you are, yes, because there's that fear that I'm using this document illegally, and I'm just going to put people's faces and sell a refugee status to other people who are undocumented. So that was the fear that I had to go through when I was making this body of work. So then I went back, and then I was like, oh no, we've done everything, blah, blah, blah. So the people there now know me. So that's the good thing about engaging and have a relationship with spaces, because you can sort of like back that up. But in terms of the climate in South Africa, it's very sensitive. Even with this body of work, I had to get writers, a Zimbabwean writer and a South African writer. I had to get a Zimbabwean writer because there needs to be a context as to why Zimbabweans are using this document and how the issues back home in Zimbabwe have gotten people to be in this state. And then also there's a juxtaposed narrative of why South Africans are against that. So I needed to be very, very, I needed to have a balanced view from both sides of the fence, and not just make it about me, but also make it about the Gayton Mackenzies of this world, and all this, yeah. So, so I'm happy that you.